Okay, so welcome along today, everyone. And for those watching afterwards again, we've got one of our regular webinars, and I'm personally really excited about this one because I really enjoyed Kate's last one, and I think it's a really interesting subject. It's really important in today's world, ever more so than ever. And yeah, I'll hand over to you, Kate, to introduce yourself, because I won't do yourself justice. So you introduce yourself and explain what you're going to talk about.
Lovely, thanks Mark. Okay, so I'm Kate Binnington. I'm an occupational therapist, and what we're going to talk today about is spaces and places. And what I mean by that is we're going to just take some time out to think about how do the environments that we spend time in, so how do the physical spaces and the social spaces we spend time in, how do they impact on the things that we do, how we do them, and ultimately how we feel about how we do them and how we feel about what we're doing with our time. So that's the purpose of today. There'll be lots of other bits and bobs that I'll mention, but that's the main focus. And as Mark's already said, if you've got any questions, please do just let me know as we're going through. That's absolutely fine. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. So as I say, I'm an occupational therapist. My background is I've worked in a variety of mental health services and settings over the years, done loads of group work, loads of training, all that kind of thing. And this workplace wellbeing workshop is part of a new venture, really. It's part of something new that I'm offering for people, because I feel like occupational therapy has got something for everyone, not just those people that are in health services. Occupational therapy is about all the things that we do with our time. So it often sounds like it's mostly about work, but it's actually about kind of all the things that make up our day-to-day life. And I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through the presentation. So what we're going to talk about today, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the occupational perspective and why I think it's useful for us to consider that in our day-to-day lives. And then I'm going to give you some theory, really. So there's going to be quite a lot of me talking about some theory about why it's useful to think about our environment, why it's useful to think about how the spaces and places impact on us, and what that means for how we can make changes in our lives. So part of this, there'll be some exercises to do that either can do them together as a group, or you can come back to them, entirely flexible and led by you guys, but some tools, some strategies and some structures to help you think about how you work as an individual. Everyone's completely different. Everyone's context and everyone's life is completely different. But if you can understand better the nuances and you can kind of consciously think about how you work and how you interact with your environment, it gives you the opportunity to make plans, to make changes. So it means that you can recognize if something isn't working very well, can really think about why that is, and then you can make changes to make your life feel easier or better or less stressful or whatever it is that you're looking to do. So that's the plan for today. As I say, quite flexible in terms of time today, depending on if there's questions or not. Just do interrupt if you need to. Oh, I've just seen there's some chat there. Let me just have a quick check in. Sorry.
That's just me, Kate, just telling
people. Oh, right. Sorry. Just because I always feel like I'm going to miss the chat box because I'm chatting. And I can't.
I'll monitor it as well. So
brilliant. Thank you, Mark.
If anything, I'll try and ask it for them.
Bro. So, oh no, I've lost my clicker. Okay, so is, like I say, it's about all the things we do, but it's really about more than that. It's not just about the physical act of doing things. It's about this kind of dynamic relationship between who we are. So what's our identity about, all the things we do with our time and where we do them. So there's an interaction between those three elements, and that's what we're going to really explore today. The reason I think occupational therapy is a really useful perspective in this workplace wellbeing type area is that everybody has stuff they need to do. Everyone's got stuff that they want to do, and everyone's got stuff that they have to do. And everybody struggles with the balance of all that. Not many people, I don't think, can say that they've got their life set up so everything's perfectly balanced, organised, stress-free. Most people have some element of rub, some element of challenge in their day-to-day lives. It doesn't have to be big, it might be a little niggle, but there's often something there. So occupational therapy gives us tools to think about what are those niggles about, what are those stresses about, and is there small changes that we can make to make a difference to how we feel? That's ultimately the question I'm always asking. What are the changes that we can make that can make you feel different or feel better or more in control or less stressed, whatever it is that you're looking to change? How can we make that change happen in a way that is realistic and is in the context of your life? Okay, so that's what this is all based on, this whole presentation. This model is my favourite model. It's the person, environment, occupation model. And you can see the three elements there. I'll talk a bit more in detail about what the three elements mean in a moment. What this is about understanding how the things that we do, occupational performance in this model. But that just means like the things that how we do the things we do. It's a combination of who we are, what we do, and where we do it. When all of those things come together in a balanced way, that's when we feel good about life. That's when we feel satisfied. That's when we've got a quality of life that feels things are within our control. We're doing the things that we need and want to do, and things are generally okay. If one of these elements is slightly skewed, so if our environment is slightly off, so for example, say you're in an accident and you broke your leg and you couldn't get in and out your shower, your environment is then going to be causing you a difficulty to do things you would normally do. That's quite a simplistic example, but we'll talk more about examples in a moment. Or if you were feeling particularly down one day, that makes it harder to do the things that you need to do well, or well enough to feel good about yourself. And the same with occupation. Say you really enjoy, in fact, COVID's a perfect example. Say you really enjoy going out for a meal, and then all of a sudden the environment changes. That means you can't go out for a meal, and that means you feel less good. Does that sound familiar for people? Okay. So the idea of this model is that these elements shift and they're dynamic and interrelated. And that means that one change in one area will impact on the others. Now, that can sound a little bit daunting because it can sound like, well, you can't control everything in the environment, you can't control everything you do. How can you make the changes? But the really nice thing about this concept is that if you do make small changes in one of these elements, there will be impact on the others. So I hope this is making sense. I'm not rattling through too fast. The person stuff is about who you are. So it's like the internal world. It's about your identity, about your values, what's important to you, about your interests, roles. So what are you in the world to other people, and how do you feel about that? How good you feel you are at doing things. It's about how you see yourself. It's about how you are in your internal world. The environment is about what's going on around outside you. So socially and physically, what's the context? And that's what we're going to focus on today. But then there's also occupation. And as I said earlier, occupation is about all the things that you do in your life. It's about how you do them, what your preferences are, your tendencies, what's habit, so what's automatic and what just happens without you really thinking about it, what's routine and what's taken care of in that kind of routine and scheduled way. So again, the really key part for this is that everybody has these three elements going on in their daily life in everything that they do, and they're dynamic and interrelated. So they move and they shift for different tasks and activities. They move and shift in different contexts. But the lovely thing is, if you can change one thing, you can have impact on the others. Changing person stuff, so changing identity, changing personality, changing values, can be really hard work. And I say that with a smile because I know people have been in kind of psychotherapy for years and years and years, and it's a really challenging process, and it's a very difficult thing to do. Change the things you do in your life. So changing your occupation can be challenging because we have a lot of reasons why we need to do certain things that we do, and it's very difficult sometimes to change the context of our lives in that way. But my suggestion today is that the environment is somewhere that we can make small changes that make big differences, because we have more impact on the environment than we think we do. So we're going to explore that further as we go through. I think we often forget about the environment. I think when we think about change, there's a real natural tendency to think about, what have I done, or what can I do, or what did I do wrong is often a question that people kind of come up with when they say that they want something to feel different, or they want to change something in their lives. Well, what can I do? How can I bring that from me into my world to make that different? And I think that's really natural, because that's where we live. We live in our internal worlds, don't we? We live within our heads and we live within our own thoughts. But what I'm going to suggest is that we don't live in bubbles. We don't live just within our own small space. We are part of a physical world, and we do interact with people around us. And there's lots of levels and layers of interaction that go on. And it happens all the time. It's quite automatic and automated, and we don't really notice, particularly in terms of kind of, this is our life and we're just busy and we're getting through it and we're getting on with stuff. And so this opportunity here is an invitation for you to sort of take a minute and stop and think about, what is it about my environment that helps? What is it about my environment that perhaps doesn't help so much? and what bits of that might be able to shift or change, and can I see if that makes a difference to how I feel about my work, or what other bits of life you want to think about. So it's really about stopping and reflecting today, and I'm going to try and give you some tools and some strategies to help you to do that. When I'm talking about environment, I'm talking about physical and social environments. So the context of our lives are more complex than we think they are. As I've just said, lots of our life is automatic, and we just kind of run through stuff, and we just get on with things, and we don't really stop and think. But when you actually stop and think about all the things that go on in physical and social environments, it's quite complex. You've got the individual in the middle there, you can see on this model. Everyone has a unique understanding of themselves, and they have a unique way of interpreting the world. And that's influenced by past experiences, thoughts and feelings, sensory processing. So it's literally how you process the information that comes into you will impact on how you understand the world. So that's the kind of the person element there that I've already talked about. But then there's also complexity in the physical and the social worlds. So the physical isn't just about, kind of what's your house like. It's about what's the noise levels, how many different bits of noise are going on, how busy or simple is a visual scene. Do you prefer natural or man-made? There's a lot of nuance and a lot of detail in what goes on around us. Do you physically have the things that you need around you to do the things that you need to do? All of those physical environmental factors impact on whether or not you can do the things that you need and want to do in your day. You can imagine, can't you, that if, again, COVID is a great example, because you weren't able to access a gym, perhaps you didn't do as much fitness. And that's because the physical space that you needed wasn't available for you. Okay. Similarly with social world, it isn't just about physically who's there, what other people are around. There's lots of nuance. And I think a lot of the social environment is very unsaid, and it's unnoticed, because it's things like, what's the kind of the expectations of the group? What's the social world like? What's the atmosphere? What's the political climate like? Again, COVID is a perfect example that the political climate really impacts on our day-to-day lives without us really noticing. What happens up at the top influences everything coming down, because it influences the social expectations. Recent example is mask wearing. So as soon as the government said it was personal choice, I've noticed less and less people wearing masks, and there's more and more social pressure not to, whereas there used to be a social pressure to wear a mask. So you can see there that the political world impacts on day-to-day lives and might impact on somebody's sense of anxiety or sense of vulnerability in the shops. That's one example. I'm sure there's lots of others. The reason I'm showing you this is to just really kind of encourage you to think about the details. A lot of the work I do is about reflection, and reflection on details and reflection on nuance, rather than automation and unconscious doing things in space. So when I'm talking about environment, I'm going to go on to some exercises shortly. It's going to be to think about, what do you know about yourself and what do you know about your environments? And this is the sort of details that I'll be thinking about. Okay, opportunities and resources, demands and constraints. The idea of this is that both physical and social environments provide us with both opportunities and resources and demands and constraints. So opportunities and resources is literally, can you do the thing you need or want to do because the stuff is there. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with, there's a lot of work around disability that talks about the physical world being disabling rather than the individual being disabled. And it's because of physical barriers mean that person who has sort of movement difficulties can't get up the step. So it's not that person can't access it, it's that the physical environment is not supportive. So it's a constraint from the environment rather than opportunity from the environment. The important bit about this, so all environments, social and physical, will have opportunities and resources, so things that help us, and also demands and constraints, things that limit us. Lots of opportunities is always a good thing. And similarly, it's not that limitations are always a bad thing. So a couple of examples. Opportunities, resources. Don't know if anybody else gets this, but some days when I'm in a rush, feeling stressed, and I just need to nip to the shop and get, a loaf of bread. Just need to run in, run out. You go into a big supermarket and there's like a wall of bread, and I just get a bit of opportunity. There's too much choice. And then I stand there for 5 minutes trying to work out what I want. I'd have been fine because I'd just picked it up and got out. So that's an example of opportunity and resource necessarily support many and want to do. Even if it sounds like more opportunities or a good thing, sometimes who you are, what you like, are going to get in the way and be barriers, and sometimes that is true. But equally, things like the legal system is inherently full of demands and constraints. But without them, how would we feel? The demands and constraints can mean security, safety, containment, and it can take away us having to think about what other people are doing. It means that we can just inherently know that there are demands and constraints in the social environment that mean that we are safe and okay for the most part. So you can see there that the really key element is it's not about good or bad environments. And when we get onto your inverse preferences for environment, it's not about identifying good or bad. It's about thinking about how does this environment interact with me, who I am, the person, and ask them to do the occupation. How do these things come together to make my experience what it is? Whether that experience is good or bad is dependent on that and dependent on interpretation as well.
Okay, just a second.
So today,
your Wi-Fi, it says your Wi-Fi is not the best and it keeps cutting out a little bit. So maybe
my Wi-Fi. Okay, just let me. Oh, apologies. Let me see if I can.
Maybe if you cut your camera, it might be fine.
Let me just switch on to a different hub.
Yeah.
Right, bear with me.
Apologies, everyone.
Okay, am I still there? No, it's yeah, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you just need to put your slides on again.
Where did I drop out?
No, we picked you up. It was just a little bit Dalek-y.
A bit sketchy. Okay.
So yeah, I think we got it.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Okay. Okay, is that up for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Environment and tasks. So we're going to focus on work today. So this is workplace wellbeing, but the tools and strategies I'm going to talk about, you could apply to any bit of your life. So that you could apply that to things that you do out of work. You could apply it to home life. The thinking and the process can apply to anything, but we're going to specifically look at work today because that feels like the best focus. So this is an exercise. You can either do it as we're talking or you can come back to it. But I need you to think about the things that you need to do to be able to do your job. Jobs are complex. Job roles are complex. We do lots and lots of different tasks within our job life and then within our work roles. But if you can, kind of clump them together into sort of things. And I'm going to show you an example from my own work life in a moment. So think about the things you need to do to be able to job. And then think about the physical and the social spaces that you tend to work in. The dodgy Wi-Fi is just a perfect example there of my physical environment not being ideal for this job. However, we've solved it and changed the environment by changing the Wi-Fi hub. But once you think about that, so when you've got this list of the things that you need to do and you think about the spaces that you work in, think about if it's a good match. Does your environment help you do the things you need to do in those particular tasks? Does it help you do the range of things that you need to do? Do you always feel like you've got the perfect space, or does it sometimes work and sometimes not? These are the questions that are going to start teasing out where changes might be useful. Because if there's not a good match, you're likely to feel dissatisfied or stressed, or like you can't quite get things done, or you're not quite sure why some days you can do stuff and some days it's more challenging. What we're going to encourage you to think about today is that different tasks and activities might need different environments. I think there's a real tendency, particularly with work, to be in your workspace to do all of your work tasks. Now, for some people, that's fine. And for some people, that works really well. But for other people, that's sometimes challenging. And this is where the individualization, I think, comes in, is that if you can understand how you work as an individual, you can really think about what is it about this environment that I could make work better? What is it about the environment that I might need to change a little bit? or what is it about this that really works? And I need to remember this and come back to it. So even if you've got the perfect match between your tasks and your environment, that's still good to think about, because it still helps you understand how you work and why things work for you, because then you can use that when you're planning for future things. So this is an example. And this is kind of what I would encourage you to kind of think about doing. If you're feeling that there's not a good match between your environment and your work, think about an ideal environment. So down the left-hand side, you can see some different tasks that I need to do within my work role. So part of my job is developing new programs. It's about developing group programs. It's about doing things like this. Places where I need to be energized and creative and motivated to kind of get on and get ideas and get things going. I also sometimes need to concentrate. I need to do written work. I need to write reports. I need to do things that somebody else needs to be able to understand what I'm trying to say. And that might be some quite complex ideas that I'm trying to communicate. And then another thing that I need to do in my work is I need to plan. I need to analyze. I need to use critical thinking skills to understand clients, to understand the world through this occupational perspective, and to really kind of dig into what's going on for people. So they're three very separate tasks for me. And I find that I need three very separate environments to help me do those to the best of my ability. So when I need to motivate and energize, I need to be somewhere busy. I need like a bit of a buzz, a bit of background, always like to be warm. I think I've got warmth on all three of those actually. But I also need like my laptop, but I need space, I need a desk, I need somewhere to sit. I like a tea or a coffee. I like people to be around. So that's my physical environment I've just described. But I also like people to be around, like to be there, a level of interaction, bit of people watching, but it does need to be a space where working isn't unusual. So I would feel awkward if I was in a space where nobody else was sat working. I like it to be a bit of a mix, a bit of a hybrid space, which thankfully with COVID, I think a lot more people are working from home. There's a lot more of those sorts of spaces around, but there's a real sense of energy that helps me feel energized and motivated. Contrastingly, when I need to concentrate, I can't do it where it's busy. I used to work in the NHS. I used to work for a really quite busy team with a lot of professionals. And there was people constantly in and out the office. The phone was always going, lots and lots of stuff going on. I'm really interested and really, that was really energetic and nice when I wanted to get like new stuff on the board. But when I was trying to write reports, I would often come and work from home. And when I look back on that and I reflect, and I think actually it's because that environment is not somewhere I can think. I need it to be quiet. I need to be just me and my laptop and my notebook. I need nothing on my desk that's going to distract me, because I want to kind of go into my work. Silence is ideal if I can get it, but I can't always. But no one around and not unexpected interruptions. So, I switch my phone off. I don't have my email available when I'm trying to do this kind of work. I don't sit where I can hear the doorbell ring. All these changes to my environment help me to do that task better, because I know I need that level of concentration. But I also need to make sure I set alarms, because if I don't, then I can get trapped like down the rabbit hole of work. So I do need to set alarms to make sure that I don't miss the things that I need to do. So there's some of the environmental things that I need to change to help me do those things. Then the third task, so planning and analysis, obviously a bit linked to the written work. So some of the reports will include some of this analysis and critical thinking. But what I do find is that for my best critical thinking or my best analytical work, I'm actually better if I'm not at a desk. So when I'm not constrained by the need to write something down, or there isn't a blank screen in front of me looking for my thoughts, I think better. I can think outside the box a bit more. I can really mull things over and ponder them and turn them around in my mind and really get that level of thinking that I find important for my work. But I don't do it at a desk. And I found that I often do it when I'm engaged in something else. So if I'm driving or brushing my teeth, in the shower, walking up to school, all the things where my body's kind of automating what's happening, my brain is free to go off and wander and ponder and mull over and think. I do like to be on my own yet again and not have likely interactions, maybe just a small hello if I'm walking across the road, but nothing where I'm going to engage with somebody. But that's a very different feel for me. So that's a very different environment. And I do my best thinking, because I often wonder, I used to wonder why I'd come up like away from a half-hour drive to work and have loads of thinking and things that I needed to get down. And it's because when my brain's switched off because I'm automated, it means I can think about the things I need to think about in a very different way to how I think about them when I'm sat at a desk. And that's for me, that's a really clear, distinct difference between how the environment impacts on the way that I work. Everybody will have different ways of working, and you will have different things that work or not work for you. The idea of this format is that if you think about it, if you reflect on it, you notice it, then that means you can use that knowledge in your planning for how to do those best works. So if I'm in a very busy space and I think I've really got to get that report done, it's kind of no point in me starting because I just can't concentrate and I'll come back and have to do that work again. So by knowing the spaces that work well for me, I'm actually more efficient with my time. I'm more effective in the tasks that I do because I'm not fighting an uphill battle. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, Kate. So part of the lesson here is to know what sort of task you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
It's not always easy because sometimes you got a mix of tasks and then kind of working out. And to a certain extent, do we do this already by accident rather than design? Because if I use my own example, if I've got a load of calls to make, I go for a walk with the dog.
Yeah.
So that
often we intuitively find our way, definitely. And I guess what I'm encouraging you to do is notice, because that means that those days when you've not been able to do that, and then you get frustrated and go, why have I not been able to do the thing that I needed to do? You can go, oh, actually, do you know what? Was it partly because I couldn't go for the walk with the dog? Was it because I couldn't get to that space that I needed to? And it kind of allows us to be a little bit kinder to ourselves. When we're frustrated that we're not getting through the tasks or getting things done the way we want to do, it's about pulling out from just that person part. So I said earlier that we all have a tendency to locate a lot of control and a lot of blame, I guess, to the person, to your own personal abilities or skills. And what I'm suggesting is if you can broaden that perspective out and recognize the impact of the environment, it means you can not only make changes if you want to, but you can also be kinder to yourself when you've not perhaps achieved the things that you wanted to do that day. You can go, well, was it something about me? Was it something about the task? And was it something about the environment as well? So it's not always located internally.
Presumably this stuff works better in the modern world with hybrid working and stuff like that, where it's possible. Obviously, if you work on a factory floor and you've got to be in there, or the days of just having to go to an office just to be in an office for the sake of being in an office, so a boss could see that you were.
Yeah, I think it's a really positive. It's one of the positive things that's come out of COVID for me is this recognition that not everybody works the same way in the same space, and that offices aren't always the most productive spaces.
Yeah.
But even within those constraints, so when I talked about opportunities and resources and demands and constraints, even if you do have to go to an office, and that's the setup, is the small things you can do. So for me, I would often, when I knew I was stressed, I would clean my desk when I worked for the NHS, because actually having a visual space that wasn't super busy helped me concentrate better.
Yeah.
So it feels like a really small thing, but for my stress levels, it wasn't. And by not being as stressed, it meant that I could concentrate better.
Yeah. Yeah. If I reflect on myself, I can't sit at the same space all day.
Yeah.
I can be working into like 2 and a bit hour units and go and work in 3 different places.
You were naturally doing it. You're naturally shifting for your needs.
Yeah.
But what you can do then is you go, well, maybe if you did it every 2 hours, you wouldn't get to that twitchy point when it feels too much. And then you can kind of start to create a little bit more proactive rather than reactive changes to your environment, which can be helpful.
Yeah, but it's interesting the way you kind of sit for different tasks. I've never really looked at it that way. You just kind of automatically go for a dog walk when you need to make a load of calls, and sit at your desk when you think I've got a load of emails to get through, and so on and so forth. And we had another speaker as well talk about, with the kind of move to working
again,
and so on and so forth, talk about, there's a big kind of mental health crisis coming from people working at home because, they're where they eat their breakfast, they then clear their breakfast, and then that's work till they have their lunch, and then they clear their lunch, or if they do, if they're young male, then they might not do, and then the kids come home or whatever, and then that's where you have your tea, and never get out of the same environment, and that's not good for your mental health. Because
absolutely, we need as much variation in our environments as we do in everything else in life. And I think the mental health difficulties that are coming out of the pandemic are about people recognize the impact of lack of variation. So you didn't change your environment. People, and there's still a lot going on where offices are not open and people are not having a choice about kind of where they work. A lot of it is kind of led from the top. So again, that social environment stuff impacting on personal experience. It's not always a choice, and that's very hard, I think. But like you say, just being in one space for everything means that there's no variation. You don't get to express yourself in different ways, and you don't get the same feedback. So I don't work well when I need to energize on my own in the shed. I just find 1,000,010 other things to do, rather than if I'm in a cafe and there's lots going on, like the energy, the buzz kind of helps me work. And I think there's a big part of that for people's mental health as well, about connection and connecting with the social world outside of the screen, which I think the pandemic's really, really changed how we see the social world.
Yeah, you almost relish a meeting face to face.
Oh, I love it.
Whereas,
but I also
obviously
used to think it was a bit of a chore to get out and about.
And for people,
am I losing?
Sorry, and for people that work in offices, where they can't, I guess they can go to a coffee shop, or they can go to a quiet part of their office, or a lot of offices have kind of shared spaces or stuff nowadays.
Yeah, there's a lot more thought, I think, in offices, in kind of a lot of offices, not all offices. There's a lot more thought about how people might need to work differently. And that kind of old-fashioned kind of call centre, big open plan office where everyone's it's just like, it sounds like a cattle shed, I think is reducing a little. I don't know if it's entirely. But I think there needs to be a recognition that people that do work in busy offices find themselves there because intuitively that's where they work well. So the contrast of then having to work from home is really stark because they intuitively don't work well in that space. So again, it's about kind of understanding what it is. It's not just about getting up and going out the house. There's so many elements to that social environment of an office that either do or don't work for you. But if you can understand that about yourself, then that can really help you to kind of acknowledge and accept and make changes if you can, or if you choose to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fascinating. I'll let you carry on. Sorry for interrupting.
Not a problem. It's good to have questions. So the next page is literally, it's just like an example of how you could have a go at this yourself. It's just three headers. Just have a think about it and just really kind of bring that to conscious mind, as Mark's just been talking about there. So then, what do you do? What do you do once you've got this good understanding of yourself? Because, sorry,
Just a question from Amy. How do you assess if there's one factor not working for you? I refer to the 3 factors interaction model.
So what I would do if you are thinking about what's not working for you, by thinking about the tasks that you're finding challenging. So think about what's the discomfort or the trouble. Where's the trouble sit? Is it about the task itself? So is it about kind of what you're doing? Do you look around and think, oh, this environment makes me feel stressed? Or is it something going on that's inside? And it is tricky. And what I can do, I've not got it on this particular presentation, but I can send you a worksheet that helps to pull out the different elements if that would be useful. And that kind of asks questions about, again, a bit like the one with the environment that I just showed, with lots of different questions, encouraging you to think about what's going on in the environment. I've got one with the PEO model, the person, environment, occupation model, that asks questions about person and occupation and environment. And so that can be useful to work through, to think about where troubles might be or where the struggles might be.
Yeah, if you send us that, Kate, we'll send it out. Yeah. We'll send out.
That's a lovely worksheet, actually, to help work out kind of what's going on for you. And again, all of this work, all of these things that I talk about, it's all about trying to bring to mind what's going on, because somewhere intuitively you probably know where the rub is, but because you're so busy getting on with life, it's taking the time and having a structure to help you think through that. But I can send that with the slides. And that actually links quite well into this slide here about reflection and planning. So reflection, I'm always talking about reflection. I think people who work with me just get fed up with me talking about it, but it's so useful. If you can make plans based on evidence from your own life, you are likely to have a more successful outcome to your plan. So if you can reflect on and consciously think about the things that work and the things that don't work, so you can create a better understanding of yourself, you can use that understanding to plan. So here we're talking more about environment. So this is about think about times that you've worked well. Think about times that you've struggled. Think about not what was going on inside you, not what the task was, but what was going on around you. And I would really encourage, often the social environment is really important in this reflection, because the social environment is so often what just kind of goes over our heads because it's just there. So really think about who was around and what were the relationships like? What were the expectations like? Think about what you remember or notice. So often the things that we remember really well are things that haven't gone well. We're not so good at remembering things that have gone well, because human nature, I think, is often to look for where the problems were to try and avoid them happening again. It's kind of a survival thing. So try and remember a bit of both. So do something when you worked well and when you've not worked so well. And think about those questions that were on that earlier slide about what was going on around you, what was going on physically, what was going on socially, and really think about the nuance and the detail about what was going on. And that's the things to look out for in your planning. So if you do that reflection, and then you can think about planning, so that work can then lead into, well, next time I won't want to be in such and such a situation because I know that doesn't help. Or if I am, I can recognize and accept that that's the challenge. It's not about me. Some of this is about the environment. Okay. So then the other thing that I wanted to talk today about is time. Often when I run presentations about stress and relaxation, the thing I hear more often than anything else is that there's just not enough time. Time is always a pressure. Time is hard. There's not enough time to juggle everything. If you think of time as kind of part of the social environment, because a lot of the time pressure that we experience is linked to kind of expectations, demands of those around us. But the way that we organise our time is not only influenced by those demands and constraints or those opportunities and resources, but it's also about how we internalise time. So this is where, I think, was it Amy asked about kind of how do you link the three? This is where you might start linking. So the environment of time and how we understand and respond to time is a link between environment and person. What we do with that knowledge is often about the occupations. How do we manage that is the occupation. So if you think about kind of deadlines, we always think, oh, having a big deadline coming up, that's really stressful. But for some people, and again, it's about individualizing how you work. For some people, having a huge expanse of time with no deadline actually is less productive because it doesn't help kind of keep things on track. So you need to work out what kind of person you are. I work really well with deadlines. I love a deadline. I create my own deadlines. I create alarms, alerts, reminders on my phone, because I know that helps me keep on track. Because if I just left it to when it was needed, I'd be doing everything at the last minute and I'd be really stressed. So I create myself deadlines ahead of the actual deadline to help me keep on track, because that's how I work best. And then I use the environment to help me do that by creating the alerts on my phone, by creating space and time in my diary, by creating the quiet space that I need for those concentration bits, by going to the right environments, by creating a combination of how I work and how I organize my environment to support my time use in a way that helps me to help me get through the things I need to get through without feeling stressed. So I hope that makes sense for people, but it's about thinking about how you work. Do you like the pressure of a deadline, or do you like free and open timeframes that mean you can do things at your own pace? Do you like different things for different tasks? Similar to environment, it might be that you find different things work differently for different purposes and different activities. So I talked a bit there about how you internalize or respond to time, and that links really well into this idea about internal, external motivation and using your environment.
Question there again.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, Ami's just said, does this apply to work at home? I do feel some tasks are easy and somehow I try to avoid certain areas. And I guess that relates to, we all avoid certain things, don't we? Or
absolutely. And I'm just about to talk about the things that I avoid, talk about internal and external motivation. Sorry, Ami, I think I said Amy earlier, apologies for that. But yes, it does relate to tasks at home. And I guess what I would again suggest is reflection. What is it about the tasks that you're avoiding that you don't like? What is it about them that means that they get pushed to the bottom of the list? And is there a way that you can adjust your environment to support you to bring them up the list so that they don't get dropped off? And I'm going to give you an example in a moment about that. So I hope that will answer. And if it doesn't, do let me know. The reason I'm going to talk about it in a moment is because I think what you're talking about there about tasks is often about internal and external motivation. Sometimes things are really easy to motivate towards. I hope that sounds familiar. Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes it changes, different days, different tasks. Sometimes things like deadlines, like I've just said, can really help you. And some people thrive under pressure and some people freeze. About knowing who you are, and how you go. So an example for me is that accounts is the task that I don't enjoy. I'm not internally motivated for them. I'm not interested in it. I know I've got to do it, but it's not really my thing. So it goes to the bottom of my list. Doing the client work, doing group work, doing my notes, doing my thinking, that's the stuff I love about my job. And that is always done. And I'm always happy to sit down and I can spend hours doing that stuff, to the detriment of the other things like accounts and, kind of admin type things that it's not my bag and I don't enjoy. So in recognition of that, I work for myself and I have to do those things. I just have to. That's just part of the job. So I have a lot of reminders on my phone. Again, I love a calendar, I love a list, and I love a deadline. So I have reminders so that I do it weekly rather than leaving things to the end of the month or the end of the year. And what that does is it means that the environment helps prompt the task that I'm avoiding back up to the priority list, so that I use external motivation. I use the external demand of the environment, the alert, to increase my internal motivation to do the task that I'm avoiding. Does that make sense for people?
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. I just want to say yes. I resonate with that.
Right.
It is. Yeah. True.
So sometimes to try to avoid the avoiding, I use the environment to keep putting it back at the top of my list, basically. And that's kind of works for me, but you might find different ways that work for you.
And it's just the way the brain works, Kate, that you like to do the things you're good at and you don't like to do the things you're bad at. And then because you're bad at them, you don't do them, and therefore you don't get any better at them. And
absolutely.
Because when we do training on prioritization, time management, delegation, all that sort of thing. So for you, as a business owner with your accounts thing, we would kind of get you to work through, and Covey's urgent important matrix. We'd get you to work into on a daily basis into the urgent important matrix and high urgency, high importance, and which box they are. And then something like accounts, we probably tell you to delegate it.
Yeah.
To find a bookkeeper that allows you to do more work with clients.
Yeah. And I guess that I know that in my head, and at some point, hopefully my business will allow that. But currently, it just has to go on my to-do list and I have to just suck it up sometimes.
Yeah, there's all stuff I remember someone wrote a book called Eat the Frog, which you've got to, it's a daft analogy, but but we all do task lists and we do them kind of in order. We just write a list of things.
Yeah.
We put the things on the top that we enjoy doing, so then we can tick them off and say we've achieved a lot in the day. And
it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, who wants to do stuff that makes them feel bad about themselves? Nobody. That doesn't feel good. But like you say, the less you do it, the less good you get at it. But the other tip, if you like, that helps with doing tasks helps with eating the frog, shall we say, helps with doing tasks you don't want to do, is I link it to my wider value goals. So if I don't do my accounts, my business won't be successful. I really enjoy having my own business and working in this role. So if I don't do my accounts, I don't get to do the thing that I love. So I link it to my value goals rather than it just needs to get done because it needs to get done, because nobody motivates well with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the other way to think about things.
How this then links into that, and there's a whole, you can do a day or two's training on that sort of stuff. So, but it's understanding that's perfectly normal. Everyone has stuff that they're good at and not good at, and like I say, sometimes we just have to suck it up and get on with it because it needs.
We can try and create the surroundings that help us to do that without it being such an uphill battle. And that's the small changes. So that's why if I do it each week, because I've got my prompt on my phone, it means I don't get to the end of the year and be like, oh my God, like this is so awful and stressful and terrible. Yeah. And that's an environmental change that helps me avoid that sense of stress. So as much as you do sometimes just have to suck it up, you can make it better or worse for yourself. I suppose that's what I'm saying. You can kind of try and find the best fit for you. And by knowing who you are and how you work, that means you've got more chance of finding the best fit than just going through life and just kind of getting on with it, and just, which is what we all do because life is busy. We spend such a lot of time just getting through time that we forget to kind of bring some of this stuff to conscious awareness. And that's the big key element of this, is that reflective process and having some idea about, like you say, it's not just you. Everyone has these struggles. Everybody, no, but people don't think that they need external motivation, but most people function automatically on external motivation a lot of the time. So my other example about this was about getting up in the morning. So if I didn't have the kids waking me up or an alarm set, I wouldn't wake up when I need to wake up. So that's an example of an external physical environment impacting on how I do. So then you might think, well, if you didn't have that, then maybe you'd be able to stay in bed. But actually, would I want to? I wouldn't, because it's important to me that the kids get to school on time. It's important to me that I'm professional and on time and ready for the day. So I have an internal motivation that means that I want that external motivation to work. So again, it's about this combination, this interrelated dynamic between who I am and what I want and the environment and the things that I need to do. So it feels a really small bit of the day getting up in the morning. And what I'm trying to sort of demonstrate is that even those small things, they are so linked to much wider perspective, much more value, and much more about who we are and what we want than we think they are. And we need both internal and external motivation to make that work. Does that make sense to people?
Amy and Craig were both kind of said on the chat that they like the idea of creating an environment to remind you the deadlines, useful to prevent procrastination. And I guess, like talking with modern work, if we're working from home, we haven't got a boss who's leaning over our shoulder saying, have you done that before yet? Or have you done that, whatever you're supposed to do? So, and there's so many tools and apps and software systems that you can use to do that sort of stuff now.
And if you can make it habitual, so that there's a whole other presentation on habit and routine, but if you can, so my example of my lists and my calendar, every morning I move things off my to-do list onto my daily list every morning, because that means that I then review all the things that need to happen, but then I think about what needs to happen that day. And when I first started doing it, I used to find it a bit of a pain. It took a bit of time, but actually now I've been doing it for a while. If I don't do it, I'm like, oh, where am I today? What am I doing today? So there's something to be said about, if you find something that works for you, do it over and over again, make it habitual and make the good habit automatic rather than the habit of avoidance that is currently the automatic. Does that make sense? It's about, if you make the change, you have to make it happen again and again and again, and then it becomes automatic, and that becomes easier and takes less energy. Yeah, lovely. I missed. Okay. So this is just kind of a bit of a summary about all the stuff I'm talking about, environment, all the thinking about how to make changes. These are really key elements too. So the reflection leading into your planning. So there's a cycle that we talk about do, reflect, plan, do. And you just go round and round that cycle, and it means that eventually your planning becomes more and more perfect for what you need to do. But you need to do that in the context of your life. So you need to do that in the context of understanding how you work with time, how you work with the environment, and how you work personally, internal and external motivation. Some people are really good at just keeping themselves to task. Other people do need someone to check in and see where they're up to. Accountability. There's loads of stuff come out recently around accountability groups and deep working that can be really helpful. And I've got details for some of those if anybody's interested as well.
And on that stuff, that's part, the mastermind group that you're presenting at.
Yes, yeah.
Part of the reason why coaching, consultancy, mastermind groups, those sort of things work to a certain extent, because when you're running your own business, a small business person, then often nobody's holding you to account. So,
and you don't have a sounding board either. You don't have a sounding board for, this is what I'm thinking. Am I on my own here? Or is it like, is there space for this? Is it, just saying things to another person makes it more real in our own minds.
Little things like one of the guys you'll meet, I won't name them, but a similar thing with accounts, loads of paper on his desk and all those sort of things, not invoicing, and then everyone just went, just get a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
And
there will be a solution if you stop and think about it. And I think that's a really key thing to recognise as well, Mark. So
yeah, and then the next time we meet, everyone say, have you got the bookkeeper? And you go, yeah. And it's sort of thing. So yeah, obviously I'm an advocate for this, being a coach, mentor, consultant, trainer sort of thing, but get someone that does hold you to account.
And sometimes that can be as small as you've written it in your own diary that you'll have done it by a certain time. That sounds like a small change, but if everything's just in your head and a big like woof of all the things you need to do, it's really hard to work out, one, when to do it, and two, if you've done it and done it well. The more planning, the more accountability. So even writing a written plan makes you feel more accountable to yourself. If you can find space to give that to somebody else and share that with someone else, that's another level of accountability. It's all about these levels and about changes that you can make that might feel daunting at first, but can be really helpful in the long run. Yeah. So talking of writing things down, I love a plan, I love a form. This is where you can get to. So the idea of this form is that all the talking that I've done today, all the things that I've suggested you think about, this is a space to put it all, so that you don't just think about it and then it goes nowhere. If we don't write things down, if we don't make some sort of record, things often are lost. So I'm just going to move where everybody is, and then I can kind of show you on here. Oh no, I can't do that. Okay, so the idea is at the top here, you write down a task. So right early on in this presentation, I talked about different types of tasks tend to need different environments. The idea is if you've got a bit of detail about what the task is that you're wanting to do or thinking that you need to do, get that down in detail. And then for that particular task, think about your physical and your social environment. So when you're more productive and less productive, and also about time. So thinking about time frames, thinking about what helps you and what doesn't help. And once you've completed this form, you'll have a really good detailed picture of things that do and don't help you to do that task as well as you would like to do.
Just a question, Kate, on this. So would you break this down into kind of task categories rather than, because if obviously, Matt and Kate, when I did this exercise with a similar exercise with Matt on his roles and responsibilities, we do it with Post-it notes. He had about 1,000 Post-it notes.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Kate had about 7.
So that's really interesting, because I think it very much depends on how you work. So again, it's about individualizing and what's most useful. So if you're the sort of person that can get bogged down in detail, think about themes. Because if you get bogged down in detail and you have 1,000,001 tasks, but actually 10 of those really are the same thing, because they often lead to the same goal, don't they? So you can have lots and lots of tasks, but they often lead to the same goal or the same theme. I would say themes are better. Yeah. However, if you're the sort of person that's really good with big blue sky thinking and struggles to get the details down, think about the tasks, the individual tasks. So if you know a little bit about yourself, about what's your tendency? Do you tend to think in detail and get stuck? Or do you tend to think big and can't get started? Those two different, or are you somewhere in between? If you can think about the way you function, the different levels will be more helpful. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And we all have different roles. We have different, some of us are creative, some of us are more admin.
Yeah.
People, like you said, for yourself as a small business owner, you've got to wear all the hats at the moment, which makes it really challenging because some won't naturally suit. Trained or those sorts of things, and we all have stuff that we prefer to, if you're creative, you like to create.
And I think that's the thing. Think about what you're naturally drawn to. Think about what you naturally avoid, and really, really think about the things that you naturally avoid and what is it that you're avoiding. Is it the task itself? Is it the way it makes you feel? Is it that you just can't seem to get right? What is it that's difficult? And then think about the nuances and the details, because that helps. Because you might not ever make that task easy. You might not ever make that task your natural fit, but can you make it better than what it currently is? that's where you're looking for. You're not looking for massive change. None of what I talk about is about huge changes. It's about those small changes that change how we feel. And by changing how we feel, it makes us feel more in control. It makes us feel less stressed. It helps us to just feel a bit more balanced. And that's kind of what we're looking to do with this form here as well. Okay. And that's the lot. Has anybody got any questions? Maritime, all right.
Actually, I wonder, can I actually get that page, the form? I want to do a task analysis.
Yeah, I can. I'll send you all the slides, but I can also send worksheets. The one just up, that one.
You can put it in that page. Yeah, this one. Yeah,
that's fine. I'll send that as a separate document, and then you can, because the nice thing is I've got it as a Word document, so you can do it for as many tasks as you need. You can print it off or you can do it online.
Yeah.
It can be really helpful to keep going back to.
Yeah, just send
Thank you.
And we'll send it out the slides and the video and that other PDF.
Yeah, so I'll send the PEO and the task analysis. If I don't write down which ones, I'll forget. See, this is my other environmental tip. Write things down, it helps.
And on paper, yeah. Because I guess that the overall thing is everyone has their writer's block.
Yeah.
You know, it's for you, it's your bookkeeping, accounts stuff. For me, it's anything that involves admin. Hence why I have so many people that work for me that basically all do admin.
And that's it, isn't it? It's about, once you, rather than ignoring the blind spot, look at it, recognize it, find a solution. And that's that, whether the solution is finding somebody to do it or the solution is mine, which is I've got to do it and so I'll just crack on. If you don't look at the difficulty, you won't find the solution because you're too busy not looking at it. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or anything, any comments or just anything I would like to know?
Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any other questions, because it's mostly me, but I want to free it up to anyone else if they want to ask why you've got, the benefit of Kate's experience and skills here.
Hi, I would like to know, actually, I just want to say it's quite helpful. So yeah, thank you for that. I'm just curious, Kate, what kind of coach you are? Occupational therapist or?
Occupational therapist, yeah.
Okay.
So I work. My background is in the NHS, working with people with mental health difficulties.
Okay.
So I have a business working with people living in the community with mental health difficulties, but I also think that occupational therapy is a really helpful approach for everybody. And I think it's not very well known. I think a lot of people know about mindfulness and counselling and lots of other approaches. And part of the work I'm doing here in this workplace wellbeing is to try and increase people's awareness of occupational therapy as a really approachable and practical therapeutic intervention. And you don't need to have a load of problems for it to be helpful. Everyone's got their stuff. Everyone's got things that could do with a little tweak or a little change. And occupational therapy fits that really well, I think. And I'm glad to hear that you found it helpful. So yeah, it's this is where I'm heading with the work at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's useful because it's like a applied to everyone, to their daily kind of work and life. Not just maybe some misconception about occupational. It's like all the big big environment, like a big workplace.
Yeah, you're right.
So that's very interesting to know. Yeah.
And so I often say that my job is about the nitty-gritty of life. It's about all the little bits and bobs that make you feel the way you feel that we often don't think about. We think about big stuff a lot of the time. We don't always think about the small stuff. And actually, most of life is made up of small stuff.
Yeah, agree. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mark and
thank you
Kate.
for coming.
Yeah, I'll probably join another one. Actually, I registered for the other few topics, quite interesting as well. So see you guys. See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess this is really important, Kate, as well, with so many businesses and people within those businesses, because they've been given the opportunity, are reviewing their working practices. Do they go back to the office 5 days a week? Do they work from home? Do they do hybrid working? How do they do hybrid working? Are they reducing the site? So understanding this one size fits all approach, and we've got to turn up to an office at 9 till 5 and, you know, work in that open plan office, like you're saying, like battery hens.
It just doesn't work for a lot of people. And also that means it then doesn't work for the business, because they're actually not getting the best out of their staff. They're not getting the best out of their employees because it's not responsive to people's needs and styles and all. I mean, it's a much bigger question than kind of just the environment, really.
Yeah, because I read it every year, but we're the most inefficient workforce in Europe. Apparently, the French and Germans work a lot less hours than us, but produce the same amount of
Actual work.
of output. Yeah, whether it's service, whether it's, you know, like a factory, or, you know, isn't just going to stand in there and process it. And it's not like we're lazy.
No,
We have to put more hours in to make up for the fact that we're inefficient as a nation or individuals, and this might be part of it.
and I think there's also the other thing that I was reading recently is about like work-life balance and where all that came from originally, and that it was actually it was just industry sponsored a lot of this research that went into work-life balance, which is why work comes first, and how actually if you have better life balance, you have happier employees, and therefore people are more dedicated and more engaged and more effective and efficient with their time. And there's like a whole raft of interesting stuff about how well-being, health and well-being always positively influences output.
Yeah, that's a general principle, isn't it? Because the things I've got out of it, similar to your other thing, you've got to understand yourself first.
Yeah.
And, you know, the more you understand yourself and are reflective and analytical, then the better you can plan.
Yeah, and and really think about the stuff that you don't want to think about is often the other thing that's key. Don't avoid stuff, because that's the stuff that you actually need to work out a plan for. The other stuff becomes automatic because it's where your interest is or where you're good at, or all those things that we already talked about.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, not everyone can make massive changes and kind of say, look, I'm going to work from home.
Yeah.
You work on a building site or in a factory or in a pub or in an office or something like that. But you might be able to make small changes, you know.
And I think an acceptance that is a big part for me is that accepting that there is this interaction between the environment and the person. It's not just all about you not being good at whatever it is that you find difficult. There's an interaction. It's not just one element. Everything's multifactorial, and accepting that can be really kind of releasing somehow. It can really help.
That's good. Yeah. So yeah, we'll thank you again, Kate, and finish it here. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening live and those watching.
I'll send all those bits and bobs along. Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers, Kate. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.